Yo, you're watching the Screaming Fish here, people, and this time I've got yet another video for you. Obviously, I mean, I'm currently on the screen that you are watching me on. I really need to work on my one-liners and jokes and cliched sentences, my bad. But, yeah, so today we are going to be talking about the film Logan, which is the third and final Wolverine movie to star Hugh Jackman as the title character, and is directed by James Mangold. So, considering how long the script for this review was, trust me, it's long, I'm actually going to take you into the review now, instead of tell a few terrible jokes and one-liners, so, let's get in there. Speaking of which, why am I reviewing Logan in a Flash t-shirt? So, if you take Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, out of the picture for just a second, then Logan is pretty much my most anticipated film of the year. X-Men is one of the things I loved watching growing up, and the first movie in particular has a special place in my heart, not just for being one of my favourite superhero movies of all time, but for changing the game for superhero movies in general. Before that movie came out, we were still being treated to really campy and cliched superhero movies, and while some are still remembered as classics, others failed to disastrous effect. X-Men changed the game in introducing audiences to a more serious and thought-provoking type of superhero movie, and did it far better than every other superhero movie that came out around that time. Say what you will about the first Blade movie, and while I admit it's a good movie, I find it very campy at times. I was really excited, not just because I love most of the X-Men movies, but because this movie, in effect, is the last time we'll ever see Hugh Jackman portray the iconic character Wolverine. When Hugh Jackman was playing Wolverine in the first movie, he was only 17, if I remember correctly. That's how long he's been playing this character, and is still, to this day, and Wolverine, to this day, is still my favourite character in the entire franchise. But as a franchise of now 10 movies, there were only 5 of these movies that I considered great movies. Those being X-Men, X-Men 2, and X-Men First Class. And of course X-Men Days of Future Past, and Deadpool of course. Well, apologies for the really cliched sentence I'm about to say here, but now there are 6 of these movies that I consider fantastic, and Logan might just as well be the best film in the entire franchise. Logan is one of the most emotional theatre experiences I've ever had, and I'm really glad to actually say that this movie surpassed my expectations by a long shot. This movie was absolutely incredible. One of the biggest things in this movie that seriously deserves praise here is the film's well-deserved R rating. This film does not hold back at all in terms of how bloody it can get. I would even say this movie is even more gruesome than Deadpool, which is really saying something there. After flipping 17 years, we finally have a gory as heck Wolverine movie. This movie was so graphic, so bloody, and just gruesome, and I absolutely loved it. Seeing Wolverine decapitate people left and right is just so exhilarating, it's unbelievable. The action in this movie is by far the best action in the entire franchise period. They are shot superbly well, showing every graphic detail in its gory glory and masterfully choreographed, and I must say they're the most realistic action sequences I've really seen in any superhero movie. Making our main character vulnerable in this movie was an excellent decision, because in every action sequence there is just that feeling of suspense and vulnerability, because you know that at any moment our hero could be killed, which again is something I have to praise the film for. And it makes the main characters vulnerable. Wolverine is not doing well. He's not healing the way he used to, and has basically given up on all hope at this point. And Charles Xavier is suffering dearly from a mental illness. Mutants as a species are declining. All that pretty much makes our main characters vulnerable, which really adds to the film's sense of dread and suspense. And speaking of the movie's characters, Hugh Jackman gives probably the best performance of his entire career. He was so good in this movie. Seeing Wolverine in this emotionally broken state with literally no hope left inside him is really heartbreaking to watch. His powers aren't what they used to be. He's vulnerable in this movie, which actually made me care for this character even more. Every single scene in this movie had me thinking, please don't die, oh please, please don't die. It's a great way to build character and a really intriguing premise that I haven't seen done this well in a superhero movie before. And it brings a very creative and original twist to the superhero movie genre as a whole. And I do really need to tell... And do I really need to tell you guys that Patrick Stewart was absolutely fantastic in this movie? I mean, come on, this is Patrick Stewart we're talking about here. But I'm going to tell you anyway, because why not? I found Charles Xavier to be a really engaging character in this movie. I actually found a lot of his scenes to be very emotional, but at the same time, he stole the show in terms of comedy. He had quite a few comedic lines that landed perfectly and did have me laughing my spagball off. In fact, that again is something I've got to praise. While there is very little humour in this movie, it is very effective and never once betrayed the tone of the movie. And speaking of the tone, I really appreciate the fact that I was watching a Marvel movie that had the balls to be really dark in terms of the tone, even if it is a Marvel movie, it's a Marvel movie technically made by 20th Century Fox. And like I said, there are small pockets of humour scattered throughout the movie, but for the most part, it sustains an appropriately dark tone that never really feels unwelcomed and works to the film's advantage, which actually makes me feel glad that this movie wasn't made by Marvel. Now, hold on there, fanboys. I'm not saying the MCU is stupid. I flipping love that franchise, but even I have to admit that even when you compare films like Captain America the Winter Soldier, Avengers Age of Ultron, and even Captain America Civil War, as much as I hate to admit it, they have never really proven they have the balls to make a much more serious, dark and gritty superhero movie such as Logan. Which is why, at least for now, I'm glad that the X-Men films are not currently being made by Marvel, because I really feel that the tone presented in the MCU would not mesh well in the X-Men movies, but in particularly if you try to mesh it with characters like Wolverine himself, for instance. So please put down your pitchforks and torches. I'm just saying I prefer the current darker tone these films have compared to most MCU movies. I have to admit, though, the absolute best performance in this movie, alongside Hugh Jackman, has to be from Daphne Keane as Laura, aka X-23. She blew my mind in this movie. Her performance was so good. She gave a performance that was just as good as Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart himself, which that in itself is an accomplishment. Not only was this character very interesting and a fascinating character as a whole, but she had some amazing action sequences that, like all the other action sequences, were shot and choreographed flawlessly. The chemistry between her and Logan was spot on, and I really enjoyed seeing their newfound father and daughter relationship grow as the film progressed. And it's through their relationship that writer and director James Mangold addresses how important family really is in life, which I really feel is a strong message to the viewers, as well as a really effective and compelling way of adding more emotionally absorbing drama to the film. And speaking of James Mangold, his directing in this movie is just brilliant. You can clearly tell that he listened to a lot of the complaints with The Wolverine, that I will admit is a solid but flawed movie, and tried his very best to atone for those complaints with Logan, and you can tell that he put a lot of effort into this movie just by the way the film is shot. And yes, this film is beautifully filmed. It's just beautifully filmed, with some amazing shots, not just in the action sequences, but just in general, coupled with some amazing visual effects. You can tell that he is clearly trying to do something different with this movie, and as you can imagine, it pays off tremendously. The villains in this movie, I feel, also deserve my praise. They're not super-powered bad guys trying to take over the world. No, they're just regular mercenaries and scientists with no superpowers, who are trying to do what they feel is right, even if you can tell they're going about it in a really evil way. Boyd Holbrook, apologies if I pronounced that wrong, as the main villain of the movie, I found to be pretty intimidating. And that psychotic edge to him that made him that more intimidating was really cool to see, and it was a great performance in general. However, the biggest praise I can really give this movie is that, in a sense, this is a superhero movie for people who really do not like superhero movies. Let me just take a moment to explain myself here. This is not just a movie made for people who love the comics, movies, and the characters that inhabit this film. But it's also a superhero film for people who are tired of seeing a superhero movie where the main character is always in some sort of costume or spandex with the same sort of structure no matter how differently it's told, coupled with lots of jokes and unrealistic action sequences. Personally, I love a bit of all of that in movies, but at the same time, I can really see how that would be the main reason was someone who is not a fan of that genre would actually like this movie. There is no spandex or any kind of costume in this movie. The characters are vulnerable and not in any way, shape or form invincible, with the possibility of death around every corner. The story isn't about our heroes trying to save the world. In fact, they're on the run trying to protect this girl from people who want to use her for bad things. There's a much more darker tone and much more grim tone present, and it can get really emotional at times. I will admit, I was actually crying at one point. This movie was that emotional. So, my overall thoughts on Logan is that I think this is an incredible movie. There has never really been a superhero movie in the past that has really been as unique or as emotionally investing as this film was. Not only is this the saddest and most depressing X-Men movie, but I'm full on willing to say that Logan is the best X-Men movie in the entire franchise. And the best comic book movie of all time, in my opinion. Call me crazy, but that's just my opinion. I think Logan is better than The Dark Knight. And Logan not only met my expectations, it surpassed them by a milestone. So guys, that was my review of Logan. I do hope you enjoyed it. And have you seen Logan? What did you think of it? Did you think it was amazing? Did you think it was okay? Did you think it was terrible? Or are you somewhere in the middle, which I guess is okay, but I maybe need to work on my lines. But anywho, I do hope you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me on Facebook and Instagram. And comment. Why am I clicking? And yeah, so without further ado, I guess this is the part where I say goodbye. Flip, I forgot to change my t-shirt.